That day, high in the sky, an incredible wyvern circled, and she was freer than anyone else. Our hero watched her enviously on the ground, and that was the day he decided for himself. The free wyvern was the only reason he decided to stop being a troubleshooter. On the battlefield where countless corpses lay, only one remained, and he was captured by our problematic guy. Our hero turned out to be the #1 problem solver. He seemed to be popular, but no one liked him. He knew how to hide his abilities. A simple liquidator shouldn't have such abilities. The hero did not want to answer the man's questions. He wanted his to be answered, so he took out a book, and he asked if it was a grimoire. The man answered yes, and asked if the boy seriously thought he would involve others to catch one stray dog. This didn't bother the guy at all, he answered him. They, the non-entity from the Declan family, will start scurrying around again like rabid mongrels. He wanted to ask the man where he got the grimoire, but he immediately said that he didn't know, even if every greedy Declan knew. They wouldn't have hidden the book in their vault. He doesn't know how to use it, but he followed him so far. So, the value of this grimoire is high, the man said. Let her give him the grimoire, and he will beg for leniency. The guy who can return as the liquidators has no problems, like a hound. The hero just grinned and asked if an ordinary liquidator manager would have enough strength. The guy gave him the last word. The man sent him away, which only amused our hero. Suddenly, he felt something terrifying. Someone appeared behind him, and just from the appearance of a person, the hero's heart began to pound. The guy realized that a dangerous person was approaching him. He turned around and froze. A man appeared out of nowhere, and this man radiated such fierce energy, which means that this is the head of the Declan family. The stranger said that our hero had good instincts, then introduced himself. His name was Fergus von Declan, and as the hero thought, the man is the head of the magical Declan family of the Eastern continent, and of course, the head came for the grimoire, which our hero now has. And he promised to talk later. Our hero had been a problem solver for decades, but this was the first time he was meeting the head of the family in person. A magical family leading the Eastern continent. Declan, its head, is the most powerful magician in history. And this terrifying man stands in front of our hero. What kind of man is he? And how will our hero deal with him? But the guy turned out to be frivolous. He calmly said that Fergus was making him a little angry, which Fergus himself did not expect. Then he brazenly shoved the grimoire into his inventory, mockingly asking if he was trying to grab his prey, which he had obtained with great difficulty. Wasn't he ashamed at all? Fergus started laughing loudly at the guy's impudence, and our hero joined in. But he laughed very nervously. His whole body trembled. Now the hero regretted that he had not eaten that wyvern when he had the chance. After all, now the head of the family stands before him, and he has a serious aura, the most powerful magician the guy had ever met. Fergus stated that it would be easier to kill the boy and just return the grimoire. He again asked to return the grimoire, and promised that then his sins would be forgiven. After all, the guy's talent is amazing. Having seen the battle firsthand, he regretted not having recognized it earlier. A dirty rat from the slums, who reclaimed the garbage that only problem solvers touched, reached this level. How high could a boy fly with Declan's wings? How far could a blade like a boy carry Declan? Fergus offered the hero to rise alongside him, to make Declan even greater. His name should leave its mark on history. Of course, the grimoire must be returned. Our hero suddenly agreed, thinking about that wyvern. Fergus was pleased and said, "That's great, now let him hand over the grimoire." But unexpectedly, the hero said he had conditions. The head of the family must give up his place, and only then will they talk. No one expected such impudence. The spell that held the man was still in effect, and the hero asked. The leader said that he had been watching his battles. How many people died from this? Having said this, the hero killed the man just to anger the leader. And as we can see, it certainly worked, Fergus declared. That's how he decided the boy could die right now. This is precisely what our hero believed, because after all, Fergus's aura alone was terrifying. But it seems that the hero of the story is a little out of his mind, and this risk amused him to no end. He grinned and attacked Fergus. Of course, the leader had a barrier that was not so easy to break. Longer or faster, he will measure it himself, the hero shouted. Fergus said discontentedly. It seemed that first he needed to calm the boy down. Then Fergus created earth magic and hit the guy. It was immediately obvious that he was the head of a magical family. The power of his magic was incredible, so our hero escaped, but the leader's attack followed him. With no chance of breaking through, Fergus suggested that the hero think again how generous of him. Fergus asked. He wants to measure the difference in strength himself, Some things do not need to be tested, such as the gap between them. At that moment, Fergus created a seal in front of our hero, and the next second there was an explosion. Fergus himself was protected by a barrier, and then Fergus declared that he would let the boy live. And asked if the guy had changed his mind about the conversation, the hero asked what if he now bowed his head and returned to the shadow of the Declan family. Fergus asked, "The guy will do that? Nonsense. Our hero really turned out to be crazy. He sent Fergus and created a spell. Our hero is fed up with this life. He's tired of eating dog food. The hero shoots. His magic is not inferior to the magic of the leader." The guy laughed madly and shouted, "Who would agree to become a dog again? A fashionable collar and a big kennel will not change the essence." Despite the power of our hero's magic, it did not harm Fergus in any way. His barrier is still intact. Fergus called our hero a fool and said that now he would show him superior power. Lightning flew from the sky at our guy. Now he understood. That day when he looked into the sky. And he saw a free-flying wyvern, and the reason he looked up was, it's impressive that he survived the blow. Although for how long will it last, since Fergus is still alive and well? The hero said that Fergus was disgustingly strong, and Fergus asked if the guy was ready to talk. How about telling him a story? Which the hero couldn't finish, he asked. Does he want him to become his problem solver again? Fergus asked. He expressed himself incorrectly. He did not mean a problem solver, but the head of a subordinate family. Declan, the leading family on the eastern continent, is competing with the imperial power. And Fergus offers our hero to become the main faithful of the subordinate family. It seems generous. The hero took out the grimoire and said that this was his goal. Fergus stated that the guy still underestimates his importance. He needs him, and the grimoire is secondary. The guy handed over the grimoire, and Fergus praised the hero for thinking everything through. Now all his sins will be forgiven. With Declan, only glory awaits him. Everything is not so simple. Our hero was a real asshole. He just burned a valuable grimoire. Fergus clearly didn't expect this. He asked what the hell the guy was doing. The hero said that Fergus could take the grimoire if the grimoire was needed after it turned to dust. Fergus declared that he would never rest in peace. Our hero interrupted him and told him to shut up and listen. Problem solvers don't care about money, so why did he take the book? Because it is priceless. Fergus knows about the liquidators, absorbed by the young master of the Declan family, forbidden magic. This bastard ate his comrades, and Declan covered his tracks. Fergus asked, "So this is revenge?" the hero asked. "Why the unnecessary questions? Even mongrels know their lives are worthless, but they just wanted to make their damn dreams come true. It costs money and they won't return to their kennel after they leave." Fergus said he heard the last words. After casting the spell, Fergus said that he would see what the eternal, unquenchable flame, the flame of Declan, was like. So he can regret his choice to the depths of his soul. The guy only sent Fergus, burning in the flames of Declan. But instead of regrets, our hero laughed madly. He believed that it was better to die than to become Declan the dog again. Death is not so bad. He thought that this was freedom. He had not felt it in his life for a long time. It was a little sad that he could not free himself during his life. But he doesn't regret anything if he is reborn, makes full use of his freedom and completes his revenge. But something unexpected happened. The flame froze. It didn't look like Fergus did it. It was the grimoire the hero was holding. Something incredible happened. The grimoire, although warmed up, flew into our hero's body, and a seal appeared on his heart. Suddenly someone threw a coin to the boy. It was our hero. He became a little boy again. Our hero wondered what was going on. Hadn't he just been burned alive? He was trying to figure out where he was. It was as if he had returned to the past. Everything seemed so familiar. He finally understood where he was. This place was a black and white zone. It was here that our hero made ends meet before he became a liquidator. He truly returned to the past. Just in case, he decided to check it out. It was indeed him in the reflection, but 10 to 15 years younger. The only thing that remained was the mark that created the grimoire on his heart. Even after the regression, it is still with him. It's not clear how, but the grimoire definitely did something. The grimoire is even capable of something like this, considering that the head of Declan himself came to it. It shows how serious his intentions were, but there is very little information about him. We will have to come to terms with that. In any case, it's not bad. Everything is too vivid to be a dream, and the stench of sewage is real enough. But it all ends with him alive, strong and powerful in the morning. This is a kind of installation that our hero will achieve greater success, despite everything. But here's what it means to achieve great success. To succeed, you need a dream. And one day he had a dream. And it was also the dream of his comrades. And it was this dream that became the reason why he decided to leave his post. His friend called number 1, or rather Alan. He said that in the black and white zone they were nothing but vagabonds. They had no clothes, no food, no education. Then he asked which of these, in his opinion, was the worst. Alan replied, lack of food. But his friend said that if they only lacked food, they wouldn't be stuck in this dump. So why does Alan think their lives ended up in this gutter? Alan stated. But he is happy with it. The friend spoke irritably. The reason why their fates turned out terribly. Alan interrupted him and said that as he said, it suited him. The guy made a face. Then Alan gave in and said, okay, he can continue talking, his friend said. The worst thing was the lack of education. If they had studied and trained properly, they would not have been captured and enslaved by those damn nobles. So, if he ever got the chance to leave, he would like to open a library. And it was this dream that Alan decided to recreate. A library is a place where everyone, regardless of money, status, or gender, could freely read books. But Alan decided to go one step further and built a tower. There is no particular reason. He just likes tall things. And the location doesn't matter either. Alan would have filled it with every book he could find. However, there is one more thing that must be there. At the entrance of the first floor, he will place the secret manual of the Declan family, so that even the common people of the black and white zone, the scoundrels from noble families, the butchers from the market, everyone could see it. The cover will feature Declan's emblem, and inside will be described techniques that cost less than human lives. The imagination alone will make our strange hero drool. There is a problem, however. He has no idea how to get the technology, but Alan decided that his future self would take care of it. In any case, if he spreads Declan's secret techniques everywhere, those freaks will lose everything, and here too. Someone kicked Alan and started screaming. He looked everywhere for him. He told him to sit still. But in the end, he finds him here. Wants to die? He continued to kick Alan and scream. And Alan tried to remember who this boy was, who was also attacking him. Alan, the problem solver. He had more combat experience than most, excluding aerial combat. And then Alan grabbed his leg. And he said, the guy hit him 7 times, so he will return 10 hits to him. He looked scary, so the guy got scared. But our Alan forgot that now he is not a liquidator, but a simple boy with frail little arms. His handle broke from one light blow, and he didn't even understand why. And then the boy hit him again. He screamed. Alan is the youngest, but he tried to hit the eldest. He completely lost his mind. He started beating Alan again. And now Alan had to endure it. It was very painful, but his pride suffered more. The boy tripped over a rock and fell straight into the waste river. Alan decided to take advantage of this chance and escape. He ran away, and the boy shouted where he was going. Alan said that this was not an escape, but a strategic retreat. He remembered his face. The boy's 57 blows were something he decided to remember forever, because he was an experienced problem solver, a man who didn't know what it meant to give up. But now everything is bad. His arm is really broken. He is not one of those people who have only ever held a pen in his hand. He sprained his wrist from one pathetic swing. It's just ridiculous. His body is incredibly weak. It looks like I'll have to forget about the tower and the library for a while. First of all, I need to get this body into shape. Suddenly, a boy came up to him and asked if he was hungry. Alan asked if they knew each other. The boy replied no. That's what Alan thought. His clothes were worn and shabby, but at the same time fashionable and expensive. He's probably a nobleman's son who lost a power struggle and fled here. In other words, a little walking time bomb. Alan wanted him to leave, but the boy said his name was Damien. Alan replied it doesn't matter, but Damien said his mother is Bianca. Then Alan thought, it seems that he will find out something that he does not need to know. Alan asked, Damien is inhibited. Damien answered, he does not have a mother. Alan said he didn't have a dad yet, so he won anyway. It's probably time for Damien to go. There's no point in messing around with bombs. It's worth getting rid of him before he becomes even more of a nuisance. Alan decided to ignore Damien, but he just stood there. Then Alan asked if he would leave. Damien replied that he would go with him. Then Alan thought about maybe hitting him once. He sent him, but Damien told Alan that it hurt him. He will fix everything. Damien extended his hand and created a seal, smiling, Damien said. Healing hand. But this is not a healing hand, as Damien said. This is the healing light, the secret technique of the noble Blanche family. With Declan's family at risk, every problem-solver instinct was now screaming at Alan that he was involved with something nasty and dangerous. But what was this child from the Blanche family doing in the black and white zone? His family should still be thriving at this time. Alan was a little nervous and called Damien, who immediately lit up and asked if he was calling. Then Alan saw his multicolored eyes and froze in horror. Now he remembered Damien, a man from the Blanche family with eyes of different colors, the Blanche monster, a madman who will not die even if he is killed. It turned out he had been a weirdo since childhood, and our hero had the misfortune of getting in touch with him at the beginning of his new life. When Alan was a troubleshooter before the regression, one day he was sent to the Blanche family's territory on Declan's orders. Alan complained that Declan could have handled Blanche's family themselves. So why call them? His friend asked. Who knows what's going on in the heads of the upper class? The guy said he heard that there was some kind of monster living in Blanche's family. Apparently dozens died. Alan decided that it was some kind of ogre or something like that. He wasn't too worried. But his confident mood quickly changed when he saw this monster, and it was not an ogre. And the man who tears another man apart is the endless cast of the Blanche family's signature healing magic. And he laughed during the battle. True madness, a monster, an insane butcher who will not die even after death. Now this monster is sitting next to Alan and counting ants. Alan wondered what he forgot in such a crappy place. He is the only son of the Lord, and therefore the direct heir of the Blanche family. Suddenly Damien stood up and said briefly, "Food." Alan got nervous, but Damien smiled and said, "We need to eat," his mother said. "If you don't want to get sick, you need to eat well." And Alan, more than anything, because he wasn't eating. Well, that was true, although the way Damien said it made Alan want to hit him. Alan asked if he at least had money. Damien showed a bag of money and said this much. Alan's eyes were blinded by the glitter of money, and he forgot about what a monster Damien was and declared that they were now friends. Damien asked out of the blue. Alan answered confidently, "If he says they are friends, he will learn it. That is how it is. And friends share what they have. He understands that it's time to fill their bellies." Damien seemed to believe him and was happy. Evening came. Alan filled his stomach and even washed himself. A satisfied Alan said that it was a good dinner. Damien continued to stand and turn his head. Alan asked what he was doing. Damien replied that he didn't know what was above the place. Where they ate was the house. He always slept outside. This is the first time he sees something like this. What a strange child. Suddenly Damien said he remembered, and climbing onto the bed, he declared that he didn't have a father either. Alan looked at him in surprise and after a short silence said, "No, he is there." Damien said, "No, he is not there." For some reason, Damien tried to outdo Alan in this. Alan said, "By the way, Damien has a mother." Damien spun around and asked, "Where is she? She is not here." It seems that if she is not nearby, then she basically does not exist for Damien. Alan decided to watch him. Alan asked how long Damien had been alone. Damien replied that he had slept 10 times since he ran away from home. "So they are looking for him?" Alan asked. "If he slept 10 times, then 10 days have passed," Damien answered. "He still often likes to take a nap. He can sleep twice a day, that is, nap, of course. If you count everything together, it comes out to 10 times. It turns out, about 3 or 4 days, Damien plopped down and said, "But he hadn't slept since coming here. The ground is too uncomfortable." Alan thought for a moment, then took a pillow and screamed at him with all his might when he realized that Damien really was a complete madman. From head to toe, in any case, since this boy is stuck in a black and white zone, Alan can pretend to be his nanny. And forming a bond with Blanche's family, which doesn't sound like a bad idea, it could play a big role in the future. When he comes into conflict with Declan again, there are many books in the nobles' houses. But first, there are other things that need to be dealt with. A 57 layer of resentment settled in his chest. Alan said that he was going to bed. There was no need to worry him. "If it bothers you, it will turn into a big problem," Damien asked. "Breathing exercises," Alan answered. "Yes, exactly. Damien can do them too when he's done." In his past life, Alan built his magic on standard formulas. The problem's given to the liquidators, but their boundaries are obvious, so he infiltrated the homes of several noble families and stole their technology. Once he was almost killed, the secret arts that Alan eventually mastered, the enhanced body of a knight, spiritual arts, summoning, alchemy, a group of mixed techniques. But still, the power he met just before the face of death. It was a complete disaster, which is why, this time, Alan was going to learn the fundamental art of the Declan family. The art of the origin of heaven, the root of all of Declan's techniques, capable of harmonizing with the mana of all elements. He learned it for research. Now it came in handy, only he activated the breathing technique. Suddenly the seal on Alan's chest lit up. It was as if lava was flowing inside him. He didn't understand why this was happening. Alan tried to pull himself together. He needed to circulate the art of the source of heaven. But then he noticed something. It was a filth. But where did it come from? A secret, mysterious power. They say that only elite magicians from noble families of the main clan use it, forcibly directing the showers of mana into the streams to burn away the accumulated filth. Alan was trying his best to heal, and it looked like he was finally starting to succeed. He opened his eyes. Alan was covered in cold sweat, trying to breathe. He wondered how much time had passed. Damien was sleeping next to him. What is more important is that the flows are pure and the mana is purified. This level of purity may be higher than even that of his past life. However, it will be impossible to defeat Declan, even if he is reborn hundreds of times. That's just it. Now our hero realized that his chances had increased. A liquidator never gives up, even in situations where the chances of success are almost zero. In the morning, Damien shouted joyfully, which incredibly turned his hair dark. Alan did all this. He hid his bright platinum blonde hair and also changed his clothes so that Blanche's family wouldn't recognize him for now. Only his multicolored eyes remained. For this, Alan gave him a cap. Damien asked what they would do now. Alan said they're going to go and break someone's head. It looks like our hero is a vindictive bastard. The guy woke up and was enjoying a good night's sleep in the wonderful weather, when suddenly he saw Alan. Noticing him, he asked where the younger one had been hanging out and what had happened to him, whether he had bathed in the sewage or something. And who is this little one with him? Before the guy could finish speaking, Alan punched him in the stomach and said, "He came to the right place. The fact that he remembers the face says enough. For starters, he will get 123 blows." It looked like Alan was going to teach Damien bad things from the start, but suddenly other guys ran out of the house and asked what was going on. There were so many familiar faces around, a scary crowd. Alan was wondering how far he could go today. Alan didn't seem to be far behind Damien's madness. He also laughed when he fought the others. Alan wrapped his fist in magical energy and quickly struck. Damien was impressed. Then Alan called Damien and said, as they usually say in situations like this, "This is fucking awesome." One boy fell and Damien treated him, saying that they should not suffer, he would help. He was overjoyed too soon. Alan grabbed him and asked what number it was. The battle continued. The spanking lasted from morning until evening. Most of the children were already lying on the ground. There was still one left, whom Alan tormented. Alan asked how many he had counted. The poor guy said he had forgotten. Then Alan called Damien. Damien asked. His turn, healing hand. The poor thing realized that everything would start over again. One Gopnik beat up the guys. Another healed their wounds so that the first Gopnik could continue beating them. Real demons, and the poor things couldn't count past 100. Night fell. Alan lined up all the children in a row. Alan shouted. Great job, he was proud. Damien was also very happy and wanted to play again. Alan was very proud of himself. More than 100 blows per person. In total, he delivered 2,000 magnificent blows, even for a liquidator. Having fought everywhere except the prenatal fight, this new challenge made the boy begin to grovel to Alan. He asked if they could go. Alan beat them up enough. Alan replied, yes, they were free, but the guy reminded them that this was their home. Then Alan made a face and asked, so they are waiting for them to leave. It's a bit problematic. The boys shouted at the same time, no, they will leave on their own. The poor things hobbled back home. And Alan thought, this is not revenge. This is actually problematic. While Damien was actively waving at the poor boys, Alan was serious. It was because he felt himself approaching them, and the man was running towards them at full speed. Quick and stealthy, the hallmarks of a liquidator, this man probably came for Damien. Alan didn't understand why, because Alan was careful, because they were found. Blanche came to them much earlier than Alan expected. With such a small amount of mana, he can neither cast spells nor fight physically. Not good. But we must not forget who Alan is. Even as a liquidator, he never had an abundant amount of mana. He had lived his whole life facing similar situations. Nothing new. Alan decided to gather all the remaining mana and compress it. That should be enough. Alan stood up and took aim. Alan understood that he only had one chance to shoot. But this man was wearing the clothes of a typical butler, and he behaved the same way. When he saw Damien, he fell to his knees, and he cried out, Young master, he cried and cried. Does Damien know how long they had been looking for him? Where the young master lived all this time, he could not sleep for a moment from anxiety. Damien screamed for Alfred to let him go. But Alfred screamed, he can't. Until the young master returns home, he won't let him go. Damien screamed that he will never return. Alan looked at him with displeasure, thinking that running away from his family was just an impulsive, childish escape from home. Alfred apologized for such an unsightly scene. Then he introduced himself. He really was the butler of the Blanche family. I wonder if Alfred knew that his sweet Damien would turn into a fierce monster. Alfred noticed that Damien liked Alan. So Alfred asked if Alan would mind walking them home. Alan was a little nervous about walking to Blanche's family home. The nobility usually despised filth and avoided the common people. Alan could not discern the butler's motives. Although it doesn't matter, because Alan himself wanted to contact Blanche, they control the passage to the city of Kazin, where is the best academy in the entire eastern region located, and its incomparable library, as Alan aims to build a top-tier library. A visit there would do no harm. Alan said he would consider it an honor. Then Alfred said that he would prepare the carriage and asked Alan to wait. A slight detour from Alan's route with the ultimate goal of building a library, but that's okay. All's well that ends well. Alan decided to find out if the food in Blanche's house was good. They arrived at the luxurious palace of Blanche's family. On his first official visit, Blanche's estate looks pompous, and Damien is greeted by a number of butlers and maids. Butler Alfred said that it was already late, asked to rest tonight, Lenny to take care of them. Lenny turned out to be very frightening. She threateningly told Damien to follow her. It seems Damien was also afraid of her, and the butler walked along the dark and long corridor. The atmosphere was tense. He reached the office and knocked. Alfred walked in and the woman immediately asked where Damien was. Alfred replied that he was in the 7th black and white zone. Now back home, when Alfred finished speaking, the woman attacked with an explosion. The butler was not at all surprised by this. It seems he was used to her hysterics. Damien's mother screamed, "Damien is not injured. Let him say that nothing happened to him." "If even one hair falls from his son's head," the butler replied, asking the madam to calm down and listen to him. Yes, the poor butler is no stranger to madam's madness, but she still hasn't removed her magic. The butler thought that both the madam and the one who could harm the young master were lucky, because he knew who this woman was. Who could withstand the wrath of a woman once called the Bloody Witch? An apple doesn't fall far from the tree, as they say. Moreover, if it came to her son, it was fortunate that everything ended exactly on this point. Madame praised Alfred for his work. Alfred replied he was just doing his job, but added, however, there is something unusual. His new friend, Alan, was able to detect his presence and was already prepared to counterattack before he reached them. And in his hand, he had a bullet made of mana. Alfred noticed this. That's why he looked at Alan so strangely. Madame realized that Alan was talented. It was the first time that a boy from the black and white zone had such abilities. The butler's face darkened again, and he said that for this very reason he had one request for Madame. But all the worries were in vain. The butler was just strange. The next morning, he pathetically asked Alan to become his heir. Alan froze with a crooked face, and Alfred thought, surprised. True, but the boy will not refuse him. A butler of noble birth, for a rat from the black and white zone, this means honor and wealth. But something happened that the pompous butler did not expect. Alan told him to go to hell. The butler couldn't believe what he heard, so he froze in shock. He looked at Alan's indifferent expression and wondered if he had just imagined it. But Alan's dissatisfied face told him that it was true. Damien was nearby and heard Alan swearing and started repeating the word, and Alan told the butler he was very grateful. Because Alfred is considering him as his successor, but he prefers things as they are now. And yet, he was very grateful. The butler asked why, but suddenly he realized something and thought. He realized that a poor orphan born in a black and white zone mastered magic thanks to his natural talent and considered himself cool. It is clear that he himself was raised in an ordinary family and behaved arrogantly, having no idea how high the sky was. Alfred said the world is vast, Alan replied. It's not small at all, Alfred added. Right now, Alan probably thinks he's capable of anything. Even to conquer the world, Alan said brazenly. Not quite, it seems. The butler was faced with Alan's dispassion. And trying to calm himself and endure it, Alfred asked. Alan had ever heard such an expression. Goblin in the gorge. Right now, Alan is right there, not leaving the gorge, unaware of the dangers. Alan interrupted him and said that he associated himself more with the wyvern, The butler was at his limit. He even destroyed the floor with his foot. Alfred said the boy knew nothing, so he would personally show him how huge and terrifying this world was. The old man seemed to be very serious. He took Alan with him and led him somewhere, although Alan did not seem inspired. He opened the doors to see Alfred. All the butlers stood in a row and greeted Alfred. It seemed that this was enough for Alfred to be delighted. He thought that Alan should be surprised too. He turned around and asked what Alan thought. They are all around Alan's age, but they are already officially recognized as talents of the Blanche house. I'm sure Alan can sense something. Alan didn't look shocked, but he thought Blanche's house was no joke. It was hard to believe they were still teenagers, very well trained. Their aura, although barely perceptible, fills the entire space. But if you look into their eyes, you will see only a bunch of goblins. Alan said, "Yes, that's right, he feels it." The butler was out of breath with joy and asked if Alan would then accept his offer. If he succeeds, he will shine as bright as they do. No, Alan will shine brighter than anyone else. Alan said he hates the light. The butler was in despair. He did not understand why Alan refused. Suddenly, one pompous boy raised his hand and called Alfred. It was Vin's apprentice. Alfred asked what he wanted. Vin replied that if Alan really felt something, Alan would not have rejected the butler's offer. But if he rejected it, it means that Alan couldn't feel it fully. The bastard is showing off too early. He asked Alfred for permission to let him pass on some of his experience to Alan. Alfred asked if he wanted a duel. Vin replied, "Not exactly hers. Just to let Alan understand what magic was," Alfred thought, self-confident. Not a bad idea. The butler asked Alan what he thought about a simple duel with this young man. Alan thought he realized how much of a liability he was to them. The lucky loser who had rolled out of nowhere. Surely they see Alan exactly like that. Alan asked if he could choose an opponent. Alfred did not mind. Then Alan chose Vin, then another guy, and another. The butler froze, not expecting this. Alan decided to fight with 5. The guys were surprised by this. Then Alan asked, "Were they scared? If so, let them die." The room was filled with an awkward silence, and then the butler began to laugh loudly, which is exactly the spirit his heir should have. Alfred thought so. Then he asked if Alan could take responsibility for his decision. Some might say that Alan had insulted Blanche at home. Alan replied, "Yes, he will take responsibility," Alfred said. "Then they will do so. 1 minute. If he holds out for just 1 minute, he will give Alan a gift. Otherwise, he will hold Alan accountable. Most likely, he means that he will have to become his heir. The old man is trying to drag him into this. And yet," Alan agreed. "The guy asked if it was dangerous," Alfred said fanatically. "That is where the value lies. For him to grow, his stubbornness must be broken at a certain point," the poor guy thought. Things are bad. His eyes were already half rolled back. If the young master's guest was injured, his career as a mentor would be over. But Damien seemed to be carried away. Then the guy told Damien that his friend was now in serious danger and he was asking him to stop the butler. But Damien lit up and said, though he was also shocked, the hope for common sense had disappeared. Lenny said if the young master interfered, Lady Gamma would scold him, Damien said. To hell with it. For this he received, and the butler said what the mentor does, "It's time to start the duel." The poor guy sadly answered, "Okay." The poor guy thought, an order is an order. He did everything he could. He went to the guys, while Lenny continued to scold Damien. Lenny decided to go away somewhere for a while and ordered Damien not to interfere. He just smiled slyly and said, "Of course." The mentor said that he would explain the rules. The duel would be step by step, but the butler said no need. Let it be without rules. Things only got worse, the mentor said. The no-holds-barred duel format continues until one side gives up. However, the mentor could stop the duel at any moment. The mentor spoke, and the atmosphere became increasingly gloomy. The kids didn't like that some poor guy was showing off, but Damien and the butler took pity on him, and he thought that the whole world revolved around him. He was serious about crushing Alan and showing everyone his true worth, and the mentor said they could begin. Before the boy had time to get ready, he was already given a good beating. Alan did not hold back. Although it must be said that Vin, unlike the other guys, was still standing on his own 2 feet, while the others immediately fell over. Then Alan approached him and said that it seemed it would be better if he shared his experience with them. First of all, don't underestimate those who are smaller. Vin certainly didn't expect to see magic bullets. This is basic mana management, and it requires too much mana, so it is useless in battle. That's what Vin thought. But apparently, now he won't think so. Alan continued. Secondly, You can't judge others so easily. Everyone got a magical flick from Alan. And then the whipping of the leader began. Alan came close and declared, "Thirdly, the world is vast and cruel." Alan hit Vina a little harder. It seems Alan was able to teach the boy a good lesson. Now Alan will introduce all this experience directly into them. Alan felt sorry for the children to study this lesson well. But it seems that Vin hasn't mastered anything at all. He started arguing and shouting, "Crazy! This isn't magic at all." Then Alan objected. He said it was magic, physical magic, and he hit the poor guy pretty hard. It seemed that no one present expected that Alan would simply brutally beat the boys. The butler was also surprised, but for a different reason. He was surprised that Alan was able to use the magic bullet so many times. Judging by the power, it must have been compressed at least 4 or 5 times, which means if Alan had launched it at him back then, it would be very bad. This is a real natural possession of mana, and more than that, where did he learn to beat people like that? Damien, of course, couldn't resist and ran to participate in Alan's beatings. Suddenly Alfred was called. It was Lady Gamma, and next to her was Lena. It seemed she had snitched on what was happening. And so it was. The mentor was grateful to her. Lena nodded to him, and the lady asked the butler, "What's going on here?" The butler answered awkwardly. He wanted to conduct one simple test. The lady looked around, seeing a bunch of beaten-up rookie butlers and asking, "Alfred calls this a test." And then she noticed her son casting spells. Then she sighed and ordered to first tell all the students to stop. She asked Damien and Alan to return to their rooms. Damien and Alan did not argue. She then called the mentor, who tried to explain that he wanted to stop everything, but the lady, without listening to him, said that he was fired. Although all this mess was the butler's doing, in the evening she called him to her and said that he understood what Alfred was trying to achieve. But this time he crossed the line. Alfred apologized and admitted that he had lost his temper, and he was ready to accept any punishment. But the lady said, however, that what happened during the sparring between Alan and the students, Damien helped him. The butler replied, "No, he didn't help. It's just that Alan is very talented at beating people up, and it looks like Alfred has become a fan of Alan's. Also, the magic bullet he mentioned earlier, Alan used it during today's duel, but Alan squeezed it at least 4 or even 5 times, each time increasing the force. The lady said that it meant Alan had excellent mana control. She didn't see the fight itself, but Alan must have been quite spectacular. Alan single-handedly defeated 5 students with just 1 magic bullet, no matter how high the mage's level. Manipulating pure mana is incredibly difficult. The lady asked what Alan had said about the proposal for an heir. The butler answered. Alan confidently rejected him. The lady told Alfred to invite Alan here. She decided to reconsider her judgment of him. Alan entered the office with the same dissatisfied face as always. The lady invited Alan to sit down next to her. He sat down and asked if she had called him. The lady answered, "Yes, but first she heard Alfred had promised him a gift." Alan remembered that the butler had promised to give him a gift, but he had not expected that the promise would happen so soon. The lady said that Alan could open it. It was a high-ranking item. Alan was shocked by such a gift. Looking suspiciously at the lady, he thought that even in Blanche, only those drawn from the top 5 divisions of magicians received it. Usually a good relationship ends at dinner. If gifts are involved, most likely she has ulterior motives for it. A medium-ranking item would have been enough to reward a winning bet. But for a high-ranking one, the lady noticed Alan's suspicions. And she said that she shouldn't worry. Alan had helped Damien earlier, and she also wanted to ask for forgiveness for what happened today. Alan asked if he took the pill he would have to join them. The lady said no. Then Alan asked if that meant he was poisoned. The lady said a little irritatedly, "No," Alan asked. "That is, she says there are no conditions." The lady assured him that this is so. Then Alan happily thanked the lady for the gift. He was happy with the unexpected benefit. The lady said that she also had something she wanted to offer Alan. Well, Alan expected something like that. She will arrange for Alan to enter the academy and see if Alan would like to attend it with Damien. "That's really generous," the lady replied. Damien was supposed to go there last year, but he was very much against it. That's why she had to postpone her application for this year. She didn't expect him to run away like that. And that's why she makes him such an offer, because Damien likes Alan. Damien confirmed that he liked Alan, and if Alan went with him, then he was okay with it. Well, that made sense. This is a big deal for Bianca, who is afraid that her son will run away again if she forcibly enrolls him in the academy. And there is no other way to change Damien's mind, of course. For Alan, this is also a good opportunity. If he wants to get far in this world driven by blood ties and connections, it wouldn't hurt to get an academic education. It sounds good enough, but it feels like someone is putting a leash on him. So Alan said he would think about it. The lady told him to let her know when he made a decision. Then she added, "By the way, this has nothing to do with her request, just simple interest." Why Alan rejected Alfred's offer to become his heir, Alan thought about the answer. Remembering how Alfred met Damien, Alan said that his knees were dear to him. Lady Bianca did not understand anything, and the butler eavesdropped behind the door at night. Alan continued to practice. And yet it's probably because of that pill, only a tenth of it doubled, but the mana increase is already like that. It might be his mastery of fire. Usually when he consumes elixir, there is a loss and his mana becomes a little cloudier, but nothing like that here. The effect exceeded all expectations. Alan started thinking about the academy. He thought for a long time. But it seems the answer is obvious. He will get in, and it will be easier to find a sponsor. And in general, there are plenty of advantages. But still, Alan felt as if someone was about to pull his nose. So Alan decided to go for a run to clear his head a bit, but then the guy asked if he was that Alan. Platinum hair color? The only direct heir is Damien, which means this guy is from a side branch. What kind of family is this? They always get on my nerves? Alan lied. No, the guy really believed Alan and said it. What, really, ash gray hair? Some kind of nasty squint? It still fits? What an impudent fellow, thought Alan. Hair color, by the way, depends on lighting, and the difference can be significant, Alan said. Then he made such a face and said, "Let him look into his eyes." Where did he see the abomination? He has beautiful blue eyes. The guy's reaction was justified. After thinking for a bit, he still believed our little liar. The naive guy said that the look was truly kind, and, apologizing for the mistake, decided to go his own way. And our hero was showing him the middle finger, when suddenly Alfred appeared again, shouting that he hadn't slept all night, worrying that they hadn't had time to talk yesterday. Even if he became a butler, he wouldn't be washing his knees for no reason. It's a misunderstanding. Alan simply got it all wrong. The lie was revealed faster than Alan expected, and the poor guy didn't expect such a blatant lie either, as can be seen from his face. Well, now Alan also realized that he couldn't avoid an unwanted conversation. All because of Alfred, the guy started screaming. That look, he wasn't mistaken. Such unpleasant eyes, like those of a dead goblin, are rare to find. Alan admitted that it was him, and the guy kept screaming. To lie to his face like that and not feel the least bit ashamed? How could that be? His gaze moved from Alan to the butler, and seeing the old man's displeased look, the guy bit his tongue. It seemed that this guy was not in the butler's good graces. Then the guy said, "Okay, he'll let him go now. Let him come to the magic building so that he can quickly instill some measures in him." Alan agreed to come. The butler replaced his menacing look with a smile and asked what had happened. Alan answered, "Nothing special." It seemed like our hero was in the right mood, so he actually decided to talk to the guy later. Alan asked the butler if he could see the lady now. Apparently Alan had made a decision. Mrs. Bianca asked if he had been asking for a meeting since the morning. Had he really already decided everything? It seems like she was just teasing Alan, so she didn't expect Alan to actually agree to go to the academy. Still, she was glad of such a quick response. She said that she would start preparing as soon as possible. And he can rest for now. Alan thanked her and left. A minute later, the butler looked into the office. The lady immediately understood what he wanted and said that Alan agreed, and then Alfred became enthusiastic again. He started screaming. He knew it was a young man, youth, passion, fire in the eyes. He saw all this from the very beginning. The first semester will be fine. They will pay, but what will happen when the second semester comes? For someone without roots from a black and white zone, getting such a sum won't be easy. He'll receive a notice to pay for the second semester and start to get nervous. Why? Because he wants to continue his studies, and then a helping hand appears from his side. His sponsorship contract. He, Alfred, would continue his support. That's what the old man was hoping for Alan's desperation, to take advantage of this to drag him over to his side. Mrs. Bianca told him that he was shouting too loudly. Alfred apologized for getting too carried away and said that he would go to the kitchen. When he finally left, the lady exhaled. She understood why he was so happy. So many times his love advances had been refused. And now finally there's a chance. In this sense, the Academy's proposal is a plan with holes. But Alfred is so confident. Because his own senior butler once thought of the same thing, Alfred is a pathetic person. Alan reached the magic building. They told him that the guy from the side branch was here. He entered the tower and they immediately approached him and asked what business he had come for. Alan only now realized that he did not know the boy's name. Then Alan tried to describe the appearance and behavior of the guy who invited him here. Surprisingly, it worked. The guy said that they were waiting for Alan and decided to take Alan into the office. They got there and the guy told Alan that he could come in and warned him to watch his head. Alan opened the door in disbelief and a bunch of sheets of paper flew at him. Everything was covered in dust. Then someone spoke. He wasn't Mr. Allen by any chance. "Nice to meet you, it was Hank Von Blanche." The guy's cunning eyes appeared with the same cunning smile. Hank asked if Alan had come to see his little brother. It seemed like Hank had sent his little brother to invite Alan. When Alan was a troubleshooter, he had to infiltrate various magical institutes, and he noticed one similar thing. The research mages, all called scribblers, have one thing in common. The condition of their hair? They constantly pull it out and it stops growing. It was worth using anti-stress toys. If we divide this process into stages, it turns out that the first stage, not wanting to admit baldness, they hide their head under a deep hood. The second stage is to resign themselves to being bald openly, and the third stage is to shave everything off. And finally, the fourth stage, they begin research to achieve the impossible, the magic of hair growth. So far, no one has succeeded in returning hair. But this guy is a different case. He is very different from all the magic researchers. Hank asked for an apology. He had spoiled his younger brother too much, and he dared to treat the guest so rudely. Alan continued to stare at Hank. "His hair is thick, and Hank is young," Alan asked. "Hank works at a magical institute." Hank replied, "Yes, he's currently serving as deputy manager, which is strange, since Hank is very young for such a position. It's unlikely that the Blanche family would put someone in this position just because of blood, which means Hank really knows how to do something." Hank noticed Alan's intense gaze and thought, Alan is a curious person, and not at all like the usual ragamuffins from the black and white zone. Alan laughed awkwardly. He really felt awkward from such a kind and suspicious smile. It made him wary. He realized that they were incompatible with him. Hank said he heard that Alan was offered to enter the academy. Congratulations. This is a great opportunity. You can learn a lot there. By the way, he himself is a graduate of the academy, the 145th graduating class. Alan thought about this sudden attempt to become related. Alan could not relax, but he could not. Hank noticed this and said that he was simply glad that Alan was also entering Xenian, and he blurted out something unnecessary. It was time to get down to business, but first he would like to clarify something. Would Alan be able to go to prison for his friend? It seems that Alan has fallen into some kind of trap. Hank took out the book and said that the fate of Blanche's family depended on it. If Alan was willing to take the risk, he would give them this book. This is the secret teaching of the Blanche family, the light of healing. It is a truly valuable book. In the botanical room, Mrs. Bianca, dressed in a cute outfit, was tending to her plants. She could finally breathe a sigh of relief. Her tormentor, academician Damien, was finally eliminated, a real weight off her shoulders. Alan, this guy is a rare find. He has talent and a good character, although Alfred said that at times he is impudent and even rude. But at that age, it was natural. And what she liked most was that even knowing about Damien's origins, Alan stood firm, without fawning. In this regard, Alan is different, and that is why he is worth paying attention to. But for this reason, Alan will probably never become attached to anyone. And he will be free, like a bird. People can be held in different ways, whichever suits him. He needs to think about it. Such a valuable person for Damien cannot be missed. And so Alan sits in front of a book with the secret teachings of the Blanche family. Alan wondered what the catch was. The eyes were clear and transparent, and therefore it was impossible to read them. Usually, whether good or evil, the eyes at least give something away. But here, like a killer, there is not a shadow of emotion. In other words, he wears a mask, and such a mask that he himself probably doesn't know his true face. Hank said he was offering this without frivolity. No need to rush headlong after the next reward. Alan's awkwardness faded a little. He exhaled and said, "Okay, he will answer. He doesn't want to." Since they are in the same swamp, there is no point in writhing. Alan said that if Hank has a request, he can speak. He will listen. If he can, he will do it. If not, he will refuse. Hank's smile and kind eyes disappeared, and Hank said, even if the very knowledge of this could cost Alan his life. If he refuses, he can kill Alan, but this manipulation did not work, he said. Well, if that's the case, let him kill. It looks like Mr. Fake Smile has been rejected for the first time and his fragile ego has been shattered. He glared at Alan with his displeased gaze and pompously demonstrated his magical powers. And little Alan sat opposite, not moving a single muscle of his face. This did not frighten him. Then Hank stopped and said, "He can't compete with him. Mr. Allen passed the test." To be honest, he really just needed someone he could trust. But unfortunately, he couldn't be from Blanche's family. Hank was lucky he stopped showing off because Alan was ready to strike first. And Hank said, to be honest, he didn't have much hope. The ragamuffins from the black and white zone all looked the same. The young gentleman is too young to understand people, but even the valet who loved him so much allowed such a ragamuffin to be near him. "So, there is something in Alan?" Alan asked. The younger brother got into a fight with the guest, a convenient excuse, he doesn't find it. Hank couldn't cope with Alan's character. He asked him to choose one, either familiarity or respectfulness. Don't mix them. In any case, a convenient excuse arose, like the brother got into a fight with the guest, and they had to call the guest in for a conversation, which seems quite natural. Alan wondered why the deputy chief needed an excuse. Hank said it was difficult for him to speak first, but this wasn't a family dispute. There are strong ties in the Blanche family, and here Hank took off his mask and admitted that he was under the supervision of the Declan family. Just a minute, Alan's main enemy. Alan asked why. Hank explained that since Alan said he didn't care about life, he would speak frankly. While he doesn't intend to kill Alan, the fact is that he is currently studying the Declan clan's secret technique, and it seems to have come to light. A secret teaching, accessible only to Declan's blood, but he managed to obtain it in a roundabout way. Alan asked to stop, and he asked the man who should have been dead long ago how he had survived if Hank had examined him on behalf of Blanche. They would certainly have looked for a way to counter it, wouldn't they? Hank replied, "It's a good point. The Declans lack common sense. If he had limited himself to just searching for a vulnerability, he, the deputy, would have been killed long ago. At first, he really only wanted to study methods of neutralization. But then he saw that the technique was the root of all the Declan secret teachings. And hidden within them is a method that opens up the possibility of surpassing even the ideal. It looks like this guy is crazy, Damien." He couldn't stop himself. Alan understands this feeling, Hank asked. And Alan just thought, this guy is just crazy. He's completely crazy. Is he really researching such things within his family? Then everything fits together perfectly. In a past life, Declan destroyed Blanche's family, an incident related to Hank's research into a new celestial formula. Fergus the Freak put Declan's fate on the line to crush Blanche precisely because he saw potential in the new heavenly formula from the very beginning. And the reason why he was insanely strong, Alan thought. But Hank pulled him out of the abyss of thoughts. Hank asked if Alan was sorry. This business really needed some scope, Alan asked. So why was Hank looking for him? Then Hank replied, firstly, he did not report his research into the celestial formula to his family. It seemed that Blanche had assigned a spy to him, but he could not figure him out. Alan asked if he really had no one to suspect. For example, the secretary, Hank replied, is unlikely, or rather, it has more to do with the route of receipt, Alan replied, if they got on the trail through him. So the safety formula was leaked to them on purpose, Hank said, and when he realized that they were stepping on his tail, he immediately released part of the formula. As a countermeasure, he didn't want to die either. Alan asked if it wouldn't be easier to defect to Declan. He would be glad to accept, Hank replied. He had his own reasons in any case, since Alan was not directly connected to the family. He needs Alan to do this secretly. In truth, it is a joint research, but the part that is not going well on him, he will make sure that Alan gets a decent reward. Hank asked to deliver the papers to the Xenian Academy to Professor Fawn, then he will share the healing light technique with Alan. Alan put on a straight face, but he actually knew this was his chance. So he agreed, which surprised Hank, who apparently didn't expect that Alan would actually accept his offer. Alan stated that he would learn the healing light technique at his own risk, but he wanted to receive the new heavenly formula later. Otherwise, they won't be able to become true comrades in the same boat, right? Alan doubled the bet. What Hank certainly didn't expect from the child, he said. Alan is truly shameless. The name doesn't matter. Alan hasn't mastered it yet, so his research is useless to Alan, but he will share with him what he gets. However, he also has a condition. Until his dissertation is finished, he may need Alan's help. He handed over the contract and said that he hoped Alan would lend a hand if they were in the same boat. That was the least Alan could do. Alan said, okay, there won't be any problems. He'll help with anything related to the research. And by the way, he can't read. Hank froze in horror. But Alan was just joking, poor Hank said. Alan has not only no shame, but also no sense of humor. Alan asked if this professor could be trusted. Hank stated that from his student years to his assistantship, they had competed for first and second place. Alas, the competition ended when he returned to his family, Alan thought, but he was still stronger. That's how Hank wanted to finish the sentence. The world is really going to hell. There is another madman like him at the academy. Alan has something to think about. He returned to the room. Hank packed it all into the designated pocket so he wouldn't get caught. But why so many? Asked Alan. Suddenly he noticed that among the books there was also a letter. He opened it and started reading. To my dear friend Alan. Alan immediately thought, what friend, what nonsense. But Hank wrote that he had selected the most important grimoires that Alan must master. Below, he has compiled an order of study, asking people to study diligently and cultivate a mind worthy of their position. His friend Hank von Blanche, well, it's a really nice gift. You can't take that away from Hank. He's a walking library. To create a step-by-step program from the basics to higher magic, Hank is truly a genius, albeit a crazy one. So, excluding the technique of healing light and the dissertation on the new heavenly formula, it comes to about 132 volumes. Placing the grimoire of light of healing in the tower for all to see is a separate issue that will need to be discussed with Damien. You could call it a friend's privilege, and the books Hank gave me weren't just 132 volumes. They form a single category, and if such a category exists, anyone who wants to study magic will be able to build a foundation on it. Yes, before Alan thought only about storing books in the tower, but now, no, this will become the very essence of the tower. A place where every seeker could learn. Hank considered Alan a windfall. If Alan proved even slightly useful, he planned to simply send it with his dissertation, and if not, use it and throw it away. But Alan is an interesting guy. Remembering how Alan threatened him, Hank laughed madly and screamed, he only threatened to test him. To be honest, he really had no reason to kill those eyes. Alan said it seriously. He didn't care whether he died or not. Alan was different from other pigs, Hank said, and he seemed to find it amusing because he understood that Alan probably had a lot to hide, but he didn't think it was bad. He found a comrade who was able to stand next to him and look in the same direction. And he even craves the results of his work. This is a new feeling for Hank. And yet, he was really a little worried whether Alan really could read. Morning came. Alan had already changed his clothes and packed his suitcase. There was a knock on his door and they said it was time to go. Upon arrival at the academy, there will be some paperwork to fill out. And on the plus side, Alan and Damien are exempt from entrance exams. Lenny looked at Alan and smiled, saying that it seemed like Alan had now truly become a student at the academy. Alan looks good in the uniform. Alan thanked Lenny and she said that they had to go. Alan was lucky that he was exempt from the exam. This is how it is done among noble families. It seems like a special reception, not very fair, but Alan himself is not against being freed. Damien called Alan and told him to hurry. Lady Bianca had also come to see the children off. Damien seemed to be in a good mood. Bianca asked Damien to take care of himself, then turned to Alan. She said that Alan had received a great opportunity, and she sincerely hoped that Alan would achieve the results he wanted. Despite the first impression, Lady Bianca turned out to be a very kind woman. Alan thanked her for her kind words. She's right. Learning is the most important thing because it can make Alan influential, which is why rich people hide their books so much. The greatest academy of the Eastern continent, Alan is awaited by countless patrons there, and Alan intends to contact them. Alan silently told his classmates to wait because he was going. He had a Napoleonic plan. Damien admired the views, and Alan thought that Hank really was an outstanding magician. The basics of magic are simple, but they can be interpreted in different ways. Take the same water. For some, it is a source of life. For others, it is a disaster. It all depends on the point of view. The same principle can lead to different results, which is why noble houses developed in their own way. After reading all the works on magic from the pocket dimension, Alan realized that Hank's curriculum was closely related to Declan's celestial formula. Damien called Alan and said, "Friend, they arrived. Somehow quickly, they arrived at the academy." Lenny said that the carriage would not go any further, according to the instructions of the great sage, the first rector. On the day of admission, everyone, regardless of origin, must walk this path, and here they will have to part. Lenny wished that the entrance ceremony would be successful and that they would gain worthy knowledge. Damien was inspired and said they had to hurry. Lenny said that if they were late, there wouldn't be enough seats at the ceremony. He was very happy, but Alan thought, what kind of nonsense is this? This isn't a village theater where seats are given out on the basis of whoever got there first. But then he thought, that's what Lenny said, of course. She laid down some straw so that Damien wouldn't be lazy and late. Then Alan decided, okay, this time he would give in to it. Damien may be sullen, but you can't call him shameless. It wasn't at all because it was more convenient for him. Regular classes and other students made Damien happy. Alan seemed to be tired already, but Damien still had a lot of energy. Alan decided to find their places. But Damien didn't know that they had seats and said that maybe they could take those seats. Otherwise, others would take them. Damien was so happy, but he himself didn't want to go to the academy, so why was he happy then? Because of this bully, Damien fell to the floor. The bully looked at Damien with displeasure. Alan helped Damien up and asked if he was okay. Damien's mood did not seem to worsen. He said cheerfully, "Yes, everything is fine. He probably wasn't looking under his feet properly." Damien apologized to the big guy. But the thug stopped them and said that the boy had gotten his clothes dirty, and it looked like the thug wanted to make fun of the children. Alan realized, judging by his appearance, the thug was from some noble family, which is usually what Damien does in such a situation. When things started to behave like this, naive Damien decided to help using his own method. Damien said loudly, "Like this, it will become even cleaner. He will clean it so that it will shine even more than before." The bully got angry and hit the child, just as Alan thought. A fight started, but Damien was trying to help, just in his own way. Alan didn't let the thug hit Damien. He stopped him and asked if maybe they should stop there. The brute only got more angry and asked who he was. Damien happily said, his friend. Alan confirmed this, the thug said. "So that's it, good friend. Not everyone is ready to take a hit for a comrade. But today, he would regret this choice." Alan sighed and thought that it looked like he wouldn't be able to make friends with everyone on the first day. Well, that wasn't the plan, but Alan wasn't going to let the big guy insult them, he asked. He wanted to say that words wouldn't do. Naturally, their squabble attracted a group of students. Everyone started talking about who it was, the bully from the Dolan family. And they saw the children for the first time. The big guy was seriously going to fight with the child, even though Alan was an adult in a child's body. One of the guys came forward and shouted what they were doing here. They were fighting, and they were just watching. They had to break it up. But everything was not as it might seem at first glance. The guy was shouting that they needed to disperse. It would only be easier for them to fight. And to finish them off, the guys created a protective field and placed bets on them. No one seemed to care that the big guy would fight with children. In this crowd of happy guys placing bets, there was an unfamiliar guy. It seemed he was also impressed. The brute said he was Henry, the second son of the illustrious Dolan family, and then ordered Alan to state his name. Alan said melancholically, "He cannot boast of a great family. Let him consider him just a random passerby." Henry asked, "That is, the boy is not from a noble family. It doesn't matter. Such a cramped place is not advantageous for a magician." So he magnanimously gave the boy the first move. Let him attack. Alan thought what kind of clown was in front of him. He chuckled and said that the one who talks the most is the one who doesn't want to solve the problem with words. The bully got scared. Yes, Alan's provocation of course worked. The bully got angry and attacked first. Of course, Alan easily dodged the simple direct attack, then said, "There are two against him." The thug was unable to dodge the child's blow. He thought he could take as many blows from the magician as he wanted. But he was wrong. Alan's fist was heavy. Now he saw that crazy look of our hero, and the thug realized that Alan was not simple. Unexpectedly for the thug, he began to receive treatment, and it was Alan's partner's turn. Healing for further beating, but of course, the brute didn't know this, so he didn't understand why Damien was doing this. And Alan asked, apparently Henry was from a noble family, since he had time to look around when he hit him. Alan began to beat Henry non-stop, and he did it with great pleasure. Damien treated Henry non-stop, and he enjoyed it too, and kept laughing. Now Henry realized that these two were crazy. His heart was pounding, and he realized that it would be better to just faint. Only now did Henry realize that he was truly scared. But behind him, other students were shouting at him. "Whatever Henry does, don't spare them. He's a star hand-to-hand fighter. They believe in him." Words of support surrounded Henry, and he became angry, either at himself or at Alan. He shouted, "Who is he? How dare he?" Henry started waving his fists and shouting, "How dare the little brat ignore him?" It seemed like he actually hit him. The students thought so too. They actively supported Henry, shouting his name and finally shouting, "That's it for him." And although Henry's blow was direct, for some reason he felt that the blow was too light. Alan calmly did a somersault and rose to his feet. It didn't look like he was in pain. He just brushed the dust off his shirt. It seemed the thug's pride was hurt by the fact that the child didn't feel anything after his blow, and he pounced on Alan, and Alan himself thought Damien is constantly healing this guy to finish. To knock him out with one blow, Alan called upon his powers, the technique he and his comrades had created in their past life. It extracts energy from the collision of magical force particles, and this technique cannot be classified as either purely magical or hand-to-hand combat. A technique that utilized the true nature of magic, the collision method. Alan waited for a moment, then struck. When the dust cleared, the students froze. Because Henry was lying on the floor, he lost. They did not expect this. And Alan raised his hand. He demanded an ovation, applause, reaction, and response. He demanded it directly. And he actually managed to get them. The students started shouting in unison, "Cool, what a hot fight. It seems Alan will be very popular." Damien was happy that they won. He repeated that they won. Alan replied, "Okay." While Damien was rejoicing over his victory, Alan was only hoping that Damien would stop sucking his thumb. Of course, Alan attracted a lot of attention. The stranger was impressed by Alan's fighting skills. And only when it was all over, some man pushed everyone aside and shouted who had been attacking people since the first day. If he doesn't calm down now, everyone will get it. He came when the abuser got what he deserved and everything was over. Alan thought he seemed to be causing trouble, but it was okay because he was a hooligan by nature. He decided to just run away because he had already had his fun, but our naive boy happily said, "Here they are, here they are." And since the naive boy turned them in, the man called them into his office and said that it meant they had honestly confessed to everything. In that case, this time it will be limited to a warning, without penalty points, especially since the other student does not seem to have been seriously injured. But now the man would be watching them closely, which did not please Alan. The guys returned. They were lucky, fortunately. The entrance ceremony had not yet begun. Now as they looked for their seats, the students looked at them. Everyone was talking about Alan. Damien was happy about such popularity, but it seems he is happy about many things. Finally, the ceremony began. The old man came forward and spoke, following the teachings of the first rector. The old man chattered on and on. Damien was already drooling, but Alan held on, and the old man's speech was very long. Alan began to act like an older brother looking after his younger brother. Alan tried to wake Damien up. When suddenly the rector was told that he needed to leave urgently, the reason was explained to the rector in a whisper. Then the rector apologized to the students and said that he suddenly had urgent business. At this point, he decided to end his speech and let the ceremony continue without him. Then the professor stood up, and she was different from the monotonous rector. She shouted loudly, "Attention!" And everyone shuddered. Even Damien woke up. Her name is Jane. Due to unforeseen circumstances, the rector was unable to finish his speech, so she will continue. They will begin with the oath of new students. Jane called the representative of the magical faculty Dane de Dean. The students immediately started whispering. She was taking the entrance exam. Was her strength really not enough? But others replied, "You have to think before you chatter. She is the third daughter of the head of the family. If she really didn't have enough strength, would Dina have allowed her to take the exam?" Alan looked at her intently. If the Declan family is the first magical family in the East, then Dina's family takes the next place. It was Dana who became the representative of the family. She is a strong girl, and even after leaving the problem-solving group, they received a lot of help from her, but it was more of an enemy camaraderie than a friendship that connected them. But Alan was pleased to see that Dana had made it. Next, the representative of the combat faculty, Pete, a boy, went up on stage to the professor. Since they didn't give his last name, it means he's not from a noble family, although that Henry, or whatever his name was also, roughly, of that level. The students read the oath, and the professor said that she would now introduce the professors who would lead the 172nd cohort. She asked the professors to come out one by one, and suddenly Dana looked straight at Alan. Alan wondered if he was imagining it, or if she was looking at him, and it seemed that was the case, because Dana stumbled. But Alan didn't care much because he was waiting for the professor, namely Professor Fawn, and now he appeared. Alan was expecting someone similar to Hank himself, but Fawn was completely different from him. Although Hank is also famous for his nobility. Don't jump to conclusions. The professor's introductions are over and the entrance ceremony is over. It's time to follow the caretakers to their dorms, which means it's time to wake Damien up. Alan woke Damien up and he, drooling, asked if it was all over. And Alan decided to joke and told the naive boy no, Damien was caught sleeping, expelled and sent home. Of course, Damien howled because of Alan's harmless joke. Sighing, Alan went to his room. The top floor. This is what the room looks like. The academy is really good. There was a box on the bed. It looked like it contained items for everyday life, which meant everyone was given the same sets. Things easily give away their origin. Over time, everyone will buy something of their own, and here comes the roommate. It was Pete. His eyes were not the friendliest. It seemed he was not happy that Alan was his neighbor. He told Alan to be quiet. He didn't care what Alan did. Alan looked at Pete sullenly, and Pete said that they could sit until late at night. It was no problem, but it was better not to bother each other. And from that moment on, no talking. It looks like these two will be great friends. There is a sweet and kind atmosphere between them. There was silence. Pete asked why Alan wasn't answering, Alan thought. Pete is a representative of the combat faculty, and he was curious about what Pete was capable of. And since Alan was not particularly intelligent or obedient, he decided to test his abilities. Pete asked what Alan was doing. Pete immediately reached for his sword. Not bad. Even when he holds the sword, making sure that the blade does not hit anyone when it comes out of the sheath, Alan was pleased. Damien called Alan. Then he exhaled and said that all that was left was to go out and let him live as he wanted. But the only thing is, if he starts singing at night, don't bother him. It looks like Pete is unlucky with his neighbor. Damien ran up and asked who his neighbor was. Alan answered, Pete? But Damien didn't know who he was. Needless to say, Damien fell fast asleep. Damien wanted to go and explore the academy. Lenny told him that there were a lot of interesting things there. On the very first day, he had to see everything. And she also said that he had to go for a walk with a friend. Alan didn't mind going for a walk. Damien was very inspired. He kept running and laughing. But by the end, Alan was already exhausted, unlike Damien, who continued to be in a great mood. Alan was tired as if he was holding a child in his arms. Lenny probably dragged him into this on purpose. But who is he to resist? Suddenly, Alan told Damien to ask him to do so. It is enough to dig a hole and fill it with water. Damien said that they do not have a lake at home, so Alan said so. Which was a bad idea, because Damien really wanted it. He was already thinking about how he would ask to make it bigger and wider than this lake. Damien asked what to call this lake. Alan suggested Blood and Sweat. It seems Lenny sensed trouble long before it arrived. After seeing the statue, Damien said that he wanted to have one made at his home and that he would call it Blood and Sweat too. But it will be in the form of a dragon with beautiful scales, Alan suggested. The bastard was adding fuel to the fire, and Damien was throwing matches. Then Alan said, They've walked around everything. They can go and rest. Damien didn't mind. So there are approximately 7 identified problem solvers, and if you take into account those that were not identified, then there are about 10. If we calculate the main distribution points, the second building of the magic faculty will be in the center. The second building houses Professor Fawn's laboratory. Declan must have already suspected that Hank has accomplices. And now they suspect Professor Fawn. The guys were still being followed. They hid poorly. Alan noticed them right away. Alana was already starting to worry why they weren't following them. But now they've arrived just in time. He needs to find out what they know. Late at night, the spies gathered in one place. The last one asked where the others were. The second one responded, They went forward. An urgent order came from above, an order to gather at the target's lair. The guy asked if the target was the main object or a secondary one. The leader answered, A secondary one? It seems the main object was found and dealt with. They have important information. Something will be transferred to the secondary object tonight at midnight. Hank's main target has started to act since the order is being sent down to them, which means that out of several secondary targets, they are Professor Fawn. The guy asked where the singles were. They want them to come past these monstrous professors. If number 1 or a couple of others had come, they would have dealt with these professors. The other one would have answered, but number 1 won't come, and neither will the others. But Huang joins in. This information scared the guy. 669. Deputy leader of the magical groups Hanak and Declan's division. That's enough. For the sake of the mission, Huang spares neither money nor himself, which means it is the same as giving his life for the sake of the task. That's why the guy was so nervous, the chief said. But it wouldn't necessarily lead to an open fight. The families of famous magicians would not like to reveal their faces. Then it's time to go. The sooner they converge, the greater the chance of returning alive. They flew out of the building. Of course, Alan overheard their entire conversation, and it seemed like he also knew who Huang was. Huang, he's shown even in the days when Alan was still on combat duty. After Declan risked everything to fight Blanche, Huang stayed and proved his loyalty to the fading family. And now he is still dangerous. But Huang's real fame came after the war with Blanche. Declan, whose fiery wrath no one could stop, is remembered in history as a field war mage. So catching Huan is a necessity. Huan's magic is part of Declan's fire tradition. He is one of the people who brought glory to the continent. The risk was justified. Their troubleshooter went to spy and for some reason returned. And then there is also an unexpected trophy. But there is a doubt. That same goal is Hank's dissertation, Alan's. And yet they say that the goal is transmitted to a secondary addressee, Professor Fawn. His work cannot be fake, and there is no reason to doubt that this is precisely the goal. Then, it means, the target that will be delivered today is a fake. At night, Pete changed clothes. He looked at the sleeping Alan and went out, but he didn't know that it was just a piece of wood. Fawn sat in his office and sighed, thinking, Declan, these rats. He held back until they crossed the line. Now they are breaking right into his sphere of influence, and they are doing it so brazenly. The door swung open and Pete appeared at the door, fully equipped. But Fawn immediately realized that it was Pete standing in front of him and said hello. Then he said that the next time he decides to disguise himself, he should take care of his uniform. This is the basics of espionage. Pete took out the letter and handed it to Fawn, and Fawn decided it was from Hank. Hank was devising a way to get the dissertation past the Declans, but ended up getting caught just like that. No, this sly fellow shouldn't be caught so easily. What's on Hank's mind? Just as he was reading, there was an explosion, and unlike Pete, Fawn wasn't the least bit surprised. It was Huang. He said he was glad to see Fawn, which the boring professor locked in his lab might know. Pete got his sword ready. Huang asked if they had any more guests. The mercenary, the one with the knife, had been looking at him for a long time. Fawn said, the name was unfamiliar to him. Enough chatter, time to get down to business. His stench is already making me sick, added Fawn. Huang began to laugh madly. It's funny, but he's never been treated like this before. So let's get down to business. This kid is going to die. And the professor might leave him an eye and a hand. Huang immediately created a fire seal. Just before the shot, Fawn stepped forward and created a protective seal. So Fawn was able to protect Pete. Then he said that from now on he would not consider Pete a student. And as a mercenary, so Pete has to take care of his own neck. Even though Pete was talented, it seems he has no experience at all. If no signal was heard during these explosions, it means Declan's rats covered everything with an eclipse spell. And there is only hope for this fragile mercenary, Huang said. This envelope with papers is definitely from the scoundrel Blanche. They obviously won't want to just give it up. Well, it's time to play, of course. Huang didn't act alone. Declan's rats were there too, and a real battle began, which Alan watched. And he realized that it was time to take real action. It had been a long time since Alan, the #1 problem solver, had been here. But before that, Alan began to pray to the moon. He asked to grant him the opportunity to be a righteous problem solver today. But Alan was rarely righteous. Nevertheless, it was time to go. All the buildings were on fire, while Pitt, the mercenary, held on, but he had little strength. The talisman the captain gave him was a protective artifact. Pete was just lucky. Fawn told Pete to move away and created an ice spell that was the opposite of Huan's. But Huang withstood the attack, then said to Pete, "Not bad, we can trust him a little more." Then Pete noticed a magical enchantment on his sword. Fawn asked if he could stop it. Pete replied, "Anything. They've already reached the point of no return. If they don't cope, they might die." Huang said, "The Mage and the Guardian, a reliable combination." It was Huang's turn to attack, and he was not going to hold back. And while the mercenary Pete fought with Huang, Fawn got rid of every spy. Although he understood that if they continued to be dragged back and forth like this, it would be the end for them. So he had to go for broke. When the mana supply in the environment is limited and there are two commanders, a struggle for control begins between them. So how much could they take from him? Huang realized that Fawn was proposing a test of strength, and he was glad about it. He was incredibly happy about this. They both attacked at the same time, their magic connecting. They're all just monsters. There's not the slightest chance for Pete to get in. The shockwave threw Pete back and he hit the ground. It seems he lost consciousness. The other spies weren't going to interfere in their fight either, because it was a real nightmare. The leader of the spies told everyone to stop. Going there was mortally dangerous. They needed to catch their breath. Just as he was asking how many liquidators they had left, Alan ran past them. Unlike the other liquidators, Alan ran straight into the center of this battle. Neither Huan nor Fawn expected his appearance, but Alan did not attack immediately. He ran back and forth, which irritated Huang. Then he grabbed him by the neck, saying, "This is where Huang will die." It seems that Huang was quite scared, but he did not plan to give up. Huang created magic and shot at Alan, which sent him flying back. But Huang went too far. Mana recirculation occurred. While he was choking on blood, Alan attacked. Other liquidators came to Huang's aid, and he then had a chance to suppress the mana backflow. Huang wondered where this guy even came from, and then he froze when he saw Alan using magic. He was delighted, not a hint of unnecessary movement. Extreme economy of force. And the spell is optimal in speed and power when he realized that he admires Alan. He got angry at himself, created several seals at once, and shouted at Alan that whoever he was finished. Huang is truly merciless towards his comrades. His attack was incredible. And to kill Alan, he killed almost all the troubleshooters. Pure madness. The explosion was colossal. Huang was exhausted, but he thought the guy wouldn't be able to survive after that. The other liquidators also fell under the veil, but for Huang it was a trifle. For him, only the success of the mission was important. The poor liquidators burned alive and fell from the sky, and Huang thought contentedly. In this sense, that man in the mask is definitely subject to destruction. He decided to reload again. If the remaining liquidators join them, they will be able to take control of Professor Fawn. Just as Huang relaxed, Alan asked, "Is that all?" On the outside, Huang is like a madman on the loose. But inside, he is a cold-blooded snake. He long ago understood his plan to blow everything up together with the liquidators. Huang's cold-bloodedness was the reason for his defeat. Alan created a bullet and fired. And it was incredibly fast. Huang could only stand there and look his death in the eyes. Alan shot straight at Huang's head. His body fell to the ground, and then Alan came down. But don't think of Huang as a weakling. If it had been anyone else in Alan's place, he would have died. Huang's lightning-fast reactions justify his fame. However, Huang's last spell would have helped if they had teamed up with the liquidators and dragged out the fight. Alan would have lost. His mana reserves were not yet sufficient. Alan began to look for something from Huang. As expected, battle mages rarely carry items they don't trust. Ether pockets usually have owner recognition. This is the basic protection. It can be carefully removed. It was time to get down to the main task. Professor Fawn came, but Alan told him that Fawn was already late. Fawn replied, "No need. He was late because he was freezing those bastards." The professor didn't know Alan, so he became wary, prepared his magic, and asked if he himself was a rat. But Alan just grinned and asked, one madman and one fighting cock, what he thought he had just done by killing one of the Declans. The professor said that, judging by the fact that it was another rooster, it must have been Hank who sent him. But he himself was not a rooster, Fawn added. It's strange that one phrase was enough for the professor to understand that Alan was sent by Hank. Alan thought the same. The professor asked who the mercenary who approached him was and whether Hank had divided the dissertation into 2 parts. Alan replied that he hadn't heard of such a thing, but it was highly likely that part was a fake, since Hank had planned the whole thing. He thinks they've raised security in the city and at the academy to weaken Declan's influence. And although the troubleshooters used an eclipse spell, the battle turned out to be serious, even if the alarm signal came late. It's strange that the Imperial Knights haven't arrived yet. Perhaps Declan managed to bribe the Imperial Knights. The professor asked if he was the real courier, and Alan handed him his dissertation. Fawn read a couple of lines and menacingly asked Alan if he knew the contents. Alan also menacingly answered that he knew. Sensing hostility, Alan said he was no stranger to fighting. But was he sure Fawn didn't want to lose a strong ally? Fawn replied, okay, he accepted the dissertation. He also doesn't want to lose an ally, so they will maintain peace. Are there any conditions? Fawn suddenly asked. Alan didn't understand him. Then Fawn explained, Hank believes in only one category of people, those whose desires are clear and coincide with his goals. The guy is probably the same. To earn trust, he will have to give something. Then Alan thought, book? He's going to build a tower, big and high, and place books there so that anyone can read them. It would be good to place a book in it with the professor's view on magic. Fawn exhaled and said, who will read it and understand it is a question, but perhaps it would be easier to write the book himself. This activity interested him. Alan said that it was time for him to go, but Fawn asked him, how will they keep in touch since the guy will have to hand over the next dissertations? Alan replied that he doesn't like exchanging contacts with men. Let it be so. This is a communication crystal. If one part breaks, the second one will also crack. They are connected. If he wants to summon one, let him break one. If something happens, too, he won't look for fauna. Alan's insolence seemed to irritate everyone, and Fawn declared that he no longer liked contact with men. But of course, Alan was no longer there, so Fawn was talking to himself. Fawn added, some kind of nasty feeling after talking to the kid. Soon the Knights of the Empire arrived. They quickly put the place in order and also evacuated the students of the academy. In case of a repeat attack, Alan slipped into the crowd of students just in time. Damien was already nearby. And noticing Alan, Damien asked where his friend was from. Alan only said that he had seen a lot. Of course, Damien did not understand anything. And he asked, "Something is wrong with his stomach." He had a hard time going to the toilet, but Alan thought, "Huang's corpse, the liquidators of the problems, there is too much evidence. Declan will be silent for a long time. But why did the reaction of the elements manifest itself in battle? Usually there is no response." And when he reflected Huang's magic, he felt movement in the barrier. Maybe the barrier became stronger. No, this is an exceptional phenomenon. It is a method often used by elemental magicians. A technique where the user doesn't take damage, like Huang's, who spewed fire left and right, Alan said, not clearly, out loud. So Damien peppered him with questions, but Alan kept wondering why the response happened then and what the trigger was. He needed to find out if the academy had the largest Eastern library, Rafi, and that's where Alan thought he'd find the clue. Suddenly, Alan was called. It was a guy, and his name was Chen. Alan was not friendly. When Chen said that Alan fought well, Alan thought that Chen had seen him fight Huang. And should he eliminate Chen? But then Chen said that he was impressed by Alan's skirmish with the representative of the combat branch on the day of the reception. How does Alan manage to fight like this? Alan then exhaled. Apparently his name was already famous since Chen mentioned him. Alan said, however, that there was nothing special, but over time everything will change. It seemed like Alan wanted to get rid of Chen with his cold answer, but Chen followed him. Then Chen said, "He just wanted to say he likes being around Alan. He doesn't have any close friends yet." Alan knows how difficult it is to fit into a new group while he was speaking, Alan thought. Yes, he understands roughly that the academy promises equal treatment for everyone, regardless of origin. But this is the position of the academy, not the students. Beggars like Alan are still forced to wander around, but no matter, Alan said. Okay, maybe they'll get along. Chen happily replied, "Thank you, to be honest." He was worried. Being alone when something like this could happen was unbearable. He kept talking and talking. Alan thought it was a completely normal conversation. After all, in this life, he only meets crazy people. Alan has forgotten what a simple conversation means. Our hero was happy about the start of his student life. Lessons began, and Damien already wanted to sleep at the beginning of the lesson. Then Chen came and greeted the guys, then began to complain that after such a fuss, getting up so early for class was kind of cruel. Alan agreed with him and thought again. Judging from Chen's chatter yesterday, he was not from a noble family or a rich family, but he was not embarrassed and looked quite lively. Alan thought Chen was a good person. Chen asked if they heard that their M3 class would be taught by Professor Jane, but Alan had already forgotten who it was. Then Chen asked if Alan really didn't know Professor Jane. She single-handedly exterminated an entire squad of trolls. The professor entered the office, and then Alan remembered who she was. The same one who stood on the stage at the reception. She introduced herself and said that a small incident had happened yesterday and that they shouldn't worry about it and should concentrate on their studies. Before the first lesson, she will measure your magical power. The quantity and quality of your mana will be measured. She asked what they thought was more important. Ari raised her hand and Jane told her to answer. And Ari answered, "She doesn't claim to have the right answer, but if mana has reached a certain level, then its quality is more important. In a battle between mages of the same rank, the advantage will go to the one whose mana matter is more accurate and durable." The answer is yes. Quality affects the accuracy, durability, and power of spells. A lot of mana is useless if you don't hit. But there is a but. Jane clicked her tongue and Ari immediately became nervous. Jane asked what Ari's gender was. Ari replied, "She is the Marchioness of Fell." Then Jane personally became clouded and she said, "That's why." It wasn't very professional of her. She asked if there were any more interested students, but the students remained silent. Then she chose her next victim. She chose a boy and told him to get up. The guy stood up hesitantly and said that he thought the amount of mana was more important. In large-scale battles, volume was decisive. Alan thought, right, in big battles sometimes it's not accuracy that's more important, but mass. It turns out that both quality and quantity are important depending on the conditions. But this answer did not satisfy Jane either. She again showed a dissatisfied face to the student, then asked about the gender, which the guy didn't have, and Alan was puzzled. He didn't understand what he was missing while Damien was sleeping. The other students began to throw in their answers and their genders, but each one received Jane's displeased face in response. It seems she is ignoring everyone. Alan was getting more and more confused, he was thinking. So what is the answer? Is this some kind of public performance? Finally, Jane said. She heard their answers. In fact, each of them was close to the truth. And in general, there is no correct answer to this question. She was not looking for an answer. She was testing them. Let them think about whether their answer coincided with their true thoughts, or whether they were just repeating what they thought she wanted to hear. A magician should never lose his own opinion and should not give in to the views of others. Keep your will and follow your convictions, so let them admit it, they answered sincerely. They really do have the mind of a magician. From now on, they must become real magicians. That's what she wanted to teach them today. Alan, apparently he guessed, it was all just a show. Jane told the students to come out one by one. And to pass the dimension, Jane began with Ari, because she is the head of the magical department of MEMS. Her first answer was impressive. Let her come forward and write down her friend's stats. Ari ran out. For some reason, this touched Chen. He said, "What happiness." But Alan, on the contrary, was not moved by all this. The professor's assistant brought a mana measuring device. It seems these things are hard to come by. Jane said it's time to find out your numbers. Who knows? Maybe there's a monster among them. Jane seemed inspired and told Ari to place her hand on the crystal and pour some mana into it. Ari did so. The crystal lit up and showed a sign in the center. The students looked at it in admiration, and Jane explained that among the many indicators, the most important one is the one in the center. This is the degree of purity, that is, the quality of mana. The scale from the 1st to the 10th level. Ari is the 4th level. The average grade for last year's freshman was 3rd, so that was an excellent result. Ari thanked Jane for the compliment. Next comes measuring the volume of mana. This is also simple. You need to pour as much mana into the crystal as possible. Volume levels are divided into a total of 100 levels. She has 17, if we remember that last year the average was 15. Here too, Ari is slightly above the norm. The quality and volume of her mana shows how hard Ari has trained. It was unlikely that anyone expected such sweet praise from Jane, but it was sweet enough that Chen hoped that he would have the same. She had some things to do, so they continued taking measurements under the guidance of an assistant. Chen told Alan, "Why don't they check the mana too?" Alan didn't mind. Suddenly they heard a scream. The 6th level of purity, and the average is the 3rd, and the volume is the 20th. The students seemed to be envious. The assistant asked his name. Fury de Dina. The student answered. Alan immediately understood. He was from the same family as Dana. Apparently, it's a side branch, since the hair color is different. First, he said the name, and then added the last name. What a poser, Alan thought. The assistant said that for the heir of a noble house, the figures are truly impressive. Although the mana volume is slightly lower than the purity level, the result is still quite high. Alan was not mistaken. The guy really was a poser. Damien finally woke up. The boy's screams woke him up. He asked what was going on. Alan first told him to go back to sleep, but he remembered that he couldn't sleep and said that they were measuring mana. Damien asked why. Alan replied, "Who knows? It's probably useful." Then Damien shouted that he would try too. Alan felt Spanish shame for his friend. They all went down together, and the students again began to discuss the boys, the younger Blanche, and Alan, who had defeated Henry. Alan thought that being famous just because he beat someone up was somehow questionable, although Alan himself beat them up with enthusiasm. They approached, and the assistant immediately asked Damien if he would like to measure his mana as well. Damien sucked his finger, put his hand on the crystal, and poured mana. The students immediately froze. Even the poser's eyes widened, because Damien had a purity level of 9 and a volume of 67. Of course, the students were shocked, but not Alan. That's usually how ordinary people react when they see a genius, because their minds simply cannot comprehend such a blindingly high wall. However, they already knew that Damien was a genius, but to surpass all average indicators to such an extent. Now the nature of Blanche's monster is clear. Damien was originally born different from everyone else. If Damien had tried in his past life, he could have changed the map of the continent, but now everything will be different. Blanche must always remain a stumbling block for Declan. Alan decided to do everything to ensure that Damien surpassed mere mortals. The assistant said, "Mr. Damien, a magnificent result worthy of the Blanche family, but let him remember. In magic, numbers alone aren't everything, of course. This was said for show, but Damien seemed to buy it. Damien asked if his friend had checked in. Alan replied that he hadn't yet, so Damien told Alan to go next. Of course, everyone was curious about the level of the simpleton who managed to defeat the second son of the Dolan house, and he walks around lost next to the younger Blanche. However, Alan does not want to attract attention to himself. He's already known as a fighter. It's important to get the average value. Alan concentrated and poured in the required amount of mana. But it didn't work out. Alan didn't expect the threshold to be set to the minimum and accidentally poured in more than necessary. That's what happened. The result was too high, so the system crashed, and when the students saw that the threshold had been exceeded, they started whispering. Damien started shouting about what an incredible friend he had, but things weren't going as Alan had planned. So he told the assistant that there seemed to be a glitch and that the measurement would need to be repeated, and the assistant agreed. But Damien interrupted him. He said sharply, "No, this is the right result." Alan asked him silently to shut up. Then the assistant got nervous and still asked Alan to try again, despite Damien's sour face. On the second try, Alan was able to get the right number, and the students believed that the first attempt was a simple mistake. Finally, Alan exhaled. He was able to maintain his balance, but it was not to be. A dissatisfied Damien stepped forward again. He was very unhappy. Alan asked where that expression came from. Damien reminded that Alan made that face. "Well, the main thing is that we managed to fool everyone else, and we can deal with Damien later." Jane watched from her office as the second building was being renovated, but she couldn't understand why Declan had attacked Professor Fawn. Fawn was a well-known figure at the time. He would figure it out himself. She thought it was none of her business. Then the assistant came and gave a report. Regarding today's mana measurement, Jane thought that the level this semester was generally high, but Fury had scored low for his kind. But Damien is quite consistent with the genius of the Blanche family, and special attention will need to be paid to him. And then she moved on to Alan, and was immediately surprised to read that his first attempt had failed. The error code showed that Alan had exceeded the threshold, so Jane decided to take a closer look at him. Alan tried so hard to keep a low profile, but it didn't look like he was succeeding. Alan and Damien's quarrel was similar to that of an older and younger brother. A little later, Damien created a dragon. "And I wanted to make it a little more dynamic." Alan suggested making it look like his wings would spread out, and his mouth would open as if it was about to fly out. While the boys calmly talked about the details of the figure, Chen watched them in shock. "And I thought that even the Great Fury couldn't make anything more than a simple decagonal shape. And here Damien controls magic so easily, it seems that Chen realized that the world is big, and he is just a cockroach in it." Alan understood his feelings, but there was nothing he could do about it. He had to accept reality and move on. Suddenly, Damien called Alan and, smiling brightly, said that today he was happy that he had entered the academy. Alan didn't expect it, but he was pleasantly surprised. He told Damien that he was glad he liked it. Huang's parallel space bag has a lock, but only if you understand the principles of protective magic and have a little magical intuition. It would be easy to pick the lock by simply repeating the pattern of magical energy if he had the equipment. He would have done it in a week, but Alan had been secretly practicing in the training room for a whole month. Not only did Alan do this, he also used the elixir that Blanche sent him, dissolving it in magical energy. He also accumulated useful knowledge here at the academy, so now Alan can open his pocket. And so far, the only useful thing in this bag was a protective artifact. Not so bad, but there is something else in the pocket. It was a book, a magical book. Declan, Red Fire. It was secret magic created by Fergus. A hellish spell that burns even magical barriers, of course, to burn magical barriers. You need to achieve a certain level of mastery. It's not something you can learn in a day, so you will learn gradually. By the way, today is an important day, the midterm assessment season. All the students and professors have gathered in the square. Damien was very happy about this event. Alan was irritated by the large number of people, and Chenu was fine. Chen also said that everyone from Class M1 to them had gathered here, and there was some other news. There's a high probability that a canyon will break through now. A few days ago, students from M1 accidentally overheard a conversation between employees of the administrative department. They say they will need to carry out canyon stabilization work during this time, and Chen said the midterm assessment consists of 3 tests. A labyrinth that you need to go through to reach the goal. A canyon breakthrough where you need to be the first to reach the point. A martial arts simulator with monsters or opponents. They are just said to break through the canyon. Well, it doesn't matter what the test will be. The main thing is to get through it calmly. It looks like Chen won't succeed, but Alan will definitely have enough strength. Professor Fawn stepped forward and introduced himself as the leader of this test. The shadows under his eyes became more noticeable. Alan hadn't seen the professor for a long time, although Fawn doesn't know that Alan was that messenger. Fawn said that as they all know, the midterm assessment will be determined today. Apparently today they will have to test the labyrinth, Poor Chen was terrified. He clearly did not expect this. After all, he had planned everything differently. Damien found it funny and started laughing, which finished off Chen. Professor Fawn began to explain the rules. Everyone must line up by class. The goal of the test is simple. They need to go through a labyrinth, which is a sewer. They will get to the exit in any case, so they don't have to worry. Naive Chen decided that it wouldn't be that difficult and had already managed to exhale. But then the professor asked, "But whoever does it faster, he created the golem." Then Chen fell into despair again. Chen didn't expect that there would be a test with the golem, and Damien finished him off again by saying that it would be difficult for him. While it's just a dumb combat mechanism, it can present some challenges. But he has weak points, so they can handle him. But in a closed space, it is more difficult to deal with him. Then the students became nervous and began to whisper about their doubts, which seemed to irritate Fawn. Apparently magicians don't know how to keep their cool, thought Fawn. Pete, even though he found himself in a difficult situation, still showed resilience. Apparently the problem is in the environment, but there are still several capable students in the group. Some are too tense, but there are those who don't give up. Fawn looked at the students with his eyes, and then he noticed Damien, and he immediately realized that this student was not so promising and clearly was not going to do anything. Fawn continued, "The golem will stand in the way and protect the passage. The students can decide for themselves whether to fight with it or go around it. Everyone will be given a special bracelet for the test. This bracelet acts as a magical barrier. If the barrier falls, the student is eliminated. The golem pays no attention to those who are eliminated. A wonderful system of competition." The students still looked scared, so Fawn said they were all too passive. So here's what he suggested. Let them surprise him. No matter if they come first or bring out more eliminated people. It is important to him that they demonstrate determination. Those who impress him will receive a special reward, and it will be a worthy reward. The library is divided into 3 levels, upper, middle, and lower. On the lower level, there will be no hint of magical literature. This means that we will have to look for a thread at least in the middle ranks, and only the imperial family, the highest nobility and eminent families are allowed to go higher. Everyone else needs recommendations from at least 3 professors, so it makes sense to help Fawn. So, playing with half measures won't work. In any case, Alan memorized the entire floor plan and decided to calmly pass the midterm assessment. This concludes the explanation of the practical test. Fawn gave them time to prepare. They can get the necessary things from the assistant. And to get their equipment in order, the students rushed to the assistant and shouted about what they wanted. Some kind of chaos began. What can you say, whether they were magicians or street crooks? There was neither Chen nor Damien next to Alan. Damien had an assistant, but called him teacher and asked him to give him 20 morning glory seeds. The assistant said that he was not a teacher, and why Damien needed seeds. Then Damien said that he did not have an attribute, but he possessed nature magic. Then the assistant agreed to help. Chen watched this. It seemed he was envious of Damien's strength. Even Damien, who only knows how to laze around, is preparing in his own way, and Chen, will he come out of his shell? Now it's time to distribute the starting points. Students should find their name and take the corresponding position. Each of the guys had a different starting point. Damien said goodbye to his friends. Chen wished the guys good luck. Alan has starting point number 3. At point 3, there are 6 people whose names Alan doesn't even know. I remember how, being a problem solver, Alan went on a mission alone with a training squad. It was extremely awkward. 3 guys who looked like hooligans from Disney TV series approached Alan and asked if he was Alan. Dean, the leader of the Trinity, said he heard Alan was a good fighter. He had a suggestion. We'll buy bracelets of the eliminated, 30 gold per person if you exclude Alan and them. There will be 3 left. He will remove them and receive 90 gold pieces, 30 gold pieces, the monthly income of a decent commoner family. They thought that for Alan, a vagabond from the black and white zone, the conditions weren't that bad, and that Damien was covering for him now, but for how long? It's time for him to get his life in order. In general, everything is correct. For some, it will seem like cowardice and will cause rejection. But they just know how to use what they have wisely. They have money to burn. Alan asked why 90 gold coins. Then Dean continued 35 per person. Alan replied, "The count still doesn't add up," he shouted. "There are 3 of them, right? There are 6 of them. And why did they deduct the price for their lives? 35 times per head. That means 210 gold. Then it matches." Dean wasn't at all impressed by Alan's impudence. He thought this was just usurious calculations. The little rat had no sense of proportion. "Why so confident?" Dean said. "Okay, let it be 40. He won't raise it higher." Alan replied, then only 240 gold pieces. Dean didn't expect this and thought, so that's how it is. This bastard decided to make a real buck. Not thinking that they are arguing over his own life for greed, however, a savage is not given the ability to see that far. They only lost time to carry out the order. There is no more suitable knight than Alan. But since this dog is rabid, we will have to resort to another method, Dean said, which means the negotiations have failed. Alan asked where they were going. The others were okay, but he would have to pay for their bracelets. Dean got angry and asked what kind of nonsense this was. If 3 bales and 3 people were loaded into a cart, and then the bales were unloaded, shouldn't they pay for the people? Let them pay 120 gold pieces, the guy yelled. A vile boor. He had never seen such a scoundrel before. Don't forget your place, he thinks. Dean is equal to such scum as Alan. One of Dean's ancestors was a baron. Today he will teach him a good lesson, Dean called the guy, but he ignored him. Then Dean called him again. He turned around and an enraged Dean said, "Stop provoking situations that humiliate his dignity." Alan said 120 gold pieces. He would pay. He told himself to be patient. The young lady's order was more important than these blockheads. It is only necessary to establish an exchange, and their caravan company will grow many times over, Alan suddenly said, did not recognize the nobleman. Then the prices will be adjusted. Since Dean is of golden blood, he values Dean's bracelet twice as much, a total of 160 gold. Dean said, "Well, 160 gold pieces? He'll show him how that money can make life unbearably hard." Fawn repeated that if the bracelet stops functioning, they are out. The conditions for activating the protective field. Magic deals direct damage to the body and an attack saturated with mana. If the field is destroyed, the bracelet will remain in place. And the carrier is forcibly transferred outside the testing ground. There is no need to worry about injuries. It seems Alan has made 3 more enemies at the academy. The students have gathered in a group and have been transported to the labyrinth. Teleportation completed. The assistant brought up the internal video. The exam began. Fawn wasn't too worried. Dana and Damien were at the same starting point. Suddenly, one of the screens malfunctioned. The assistants panicked and told them to check the magic eye. Fawn told them to stop. He was also checking the magic eye and asked what the starting point number was. The assistant answered, "The 3rd, it seems." Alan and the guys didn't even waste a minute and immediately started bickering. It seems neither of them are going to pass the midterm test. Alan certainly is. The trio decided to attack from behind. There was no time, so Alan decided to deal with them as quickly as possible. Dean shouted, "Let's see how long the impudent freak will remain calm." He was the first to attack Alan, and his retinue followed suit. If Alan missed a magical blow, he would immediately heal him. So Alan had to dodge and hit back. Alan instantly ran up to the trio. Alan hit Dean first, but before hitting him, Alan withdrew his mana because with mana, the bracelet could break. So Alan won't be eliminated from the test, of course. The kids were inexperienced, so Alan easily dealt with them. Their pathetic attempts to attack Alan with their magic were destroyed too quickly. "Well, that was quick," Alan asked. "Their young master seems to be very rich, yes, since he managed to lure everyone away. So, for insolence, the fine is 320 gold, 1 silver for each blow." Dean started shouting that he would show Alan how dare he attack him. This irritated Alan, so he told Dean to go before hitting him. 100 blows. That means 10 golden minutes. Without Damien, it was difficult to contain the force. It is impossible for the victim and the attacker to change places, although, of course, the victim here is Alan. So Alan got 6 bracelets. What next? To get a reward, you need 3 recommendations. And he only has 1, which means he needs 2 more, and it looks like Professor Fawn will also have to give a recommendation. Alan was thinking about how to surprise the professor, and then he came up with the idea of maybe destroying the dome over the labyrinth. It is enough to break 4 supporting columns, although it is not worth it. Otherwise, he will become the enemy of the entire eastern continent. It's better to just act. With your own strength, you can achieve more. Then Alan thought about what the guys were doing there. In another part of the maze, the students were screaming that they would all fly out. They asked Damien to stop. It seems that the seeds of Damien's madness have already sprouted. He did not use the seeds to pass the labyrinth. He used them to control the golem and thus prevented other students from passing the labyrinth. One of the students fell, and Damien seemed to have decided to start his killing spree. A little further away from Damien, Chen said seriously that he just wanted to pass the test. So could they stop attacking? It seems the students' greed and ambition have won out and they are going through the labyrinth together. They fought with each other. The girls argued about who should go and take Chen's bracelet. The argument flared up, and Chen decided to take advantage of the moment and slip away while they were distracted. Chen didn't want to fight anyone, The main thing for him was to pass the test. He was running away when he suddenly noticed something. His bracelet was acting strangely. Chen didn't know what was wrong with it. Maybe Chen didn't notice how he got hit by someone. Chen was upset that he was eliminated before the test even began, so he sat sadly in the corner. He thought that he would soon be teleported, but nothing happened until suddenly he heard a voice. And this voice was gloomy. He was not from the academy, the voice said. He greets the students. It seems that some have already guessed who they are, which means they understand why they are doing this. He will announce to anyone who recognizes them that they have no demands. They simply want to avenge the great master. Today, all the students will die. They will die in despair, of course. The test could not pass peacefully. The control system is not responding. Teleportation is not working. They did not get through without problems. The assistants panicked again and started shouting who this freak was and what they should do. But Fawn told them, enough, there was no time to waste. Let them run for the other professors as quickly as possible. The assistant immediately ran away. They continued shouting that they needed to contact the rector. And Fawn was furious. He thought how these worthless people dared to attack them. As in any robot movie, the creators are assured that the robots won't attack. But in the end, they do. The golems attacked the students. Alan had already dealt with some, but others continued to approach.